This is Dr. Marta Carey Sankara. We're here with Dr. Ted Sutton, and we're talking about the power of storytelling, but we're also talking about the power of community. And we're talking about Baltimore. We're talking about Freddie Gray and the discourse that took place around a community that found itself rallying to express its humanity when it was dehumanized, when it was disregarded. So let's go back to this idea of organization, community organization, and law enforcement. Now, we already know that the law enforcement process was primarily relegated to rounding up the early on enslaved Africans that ran from the plantation. We know that that's a part of this narrative. So that's a historical legacy that exists to this day. We also know that the reason why many of the particular police officers are Irish, because many times the Irish were deemed to be less than human, and they were the ones cracking a whip. That's why they were called the crackers. So we know that there is a narrative that it's population that has always been pushed to go against a population that has been despised. So with that, we see that's what happened in part to Freddie Gray 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. What are we seeing now in the context of law and law enforcement in Baltimore, in around the U.S., right? That is worthy of us examining with some level of seriousness or intentionality. What's going on? Let's interrogate what's happening. Has anything changed, or is it still the same?
Well, no, I would say some things have changed. I would say that, but are they for the right reasons? More officers are not getting as caught up with what was being done, just like that gun trace track force that was doing all kind of heinous crimes to the people. And I said, but what we're seeing, some of them are now not committing certain things because they know there are more cameras. And that's a big difference, because I want you to do it because you know that it's the right thing to do. I want you to treat that drunk or that alcoholic or that person that is bent over, leaning in the street, just like he is the human that he is. And so to me, you work in our community, but we live here. And so you need to come with some respect, because a lot of officers were outsourced from Baltimore. So they never grew up with the Black experience actually in Baltimore City. And some of them have been from the suburbs in different states all over the country. And when I would do the trainings at the police academy, where I was doing the diamond training, and I would actually bring gang members in to tell the police academy why they hate the police, they would share the experiences of officers spitting in their face, officers that raided their house and they had the wrong address and never apologized, officers who pulled over two of my young men who was on their way to the prom in suits, and they had them sitting on the curb as they pulled the seats out of the car looking for drugs, never found drugs, and then they almost missed the prom and they didn't even say, "I'm sorry." I want you to treat our people the way that they deserve to be treated. If they intoxicated or high, or if you think that they don't deserve it, still do it. Yes, sir.
That's real, right? This idea of human, and I think that we have to recognize that people often don't see humanity in the same way. That there is a distinction. I know that this concept that I came across, Ubuntu, but Ubuntu means your humanity is tied to my humanity. That we can only be human together. I came across it in reading Desmond Tutu's work, and also Desmond Tutu's, and also when I went to South Africa. But there's this thing called Akufa Kwabantu, which means metaphysical illnesses of the people. And there are things like Abapanta Basifilotele, which means the withdrawal of ancestral protection. The reason why I'm elaborating on this is because it speaks to the power of community, and that one has purpose and agency within inside of community. And so these particular disorders, Akufa Kwabantu, this white Afrikaner told me that it means illnesses of the people. And so I asked a woman who was closer, indigenous African woman, can Afrikaners, the whites, have these disorders? And there's several of them, about withdrawal of ancestral protection or spiritual misleading and misfortunes, that kind of stuff. And she said, no, the Afrikaners can't have this because you have to be human. to have these disorders. And what's so heavy about that is that
Hmm.
when you understand and define humanity in a certain way, you expect certain behaviors to be presented. And so maybe it's been in the expectations that we have the miss, because when a person shows you who they are the first time, it's imperative to believe them. And so we have this situation by which it seems that the law is still doing what the law does because of the dehumanization of a population. But what's so heavy about your work is that you're saying, no, not this one. You're saying this is a human by the way I defined it, and I expect you to rise up to it, because we also know that, brother Dr. Ted Sutton, that nobody rises to low expectations. You have had a chance to set a high bar, high expectations for individuals around you. You've gone into community and you've spoken to those that have been despised. You've done work with what some call gangs. You've done the work with individuals. Talk about that work and how you facilitate the humanization of a population in spite of that which is spoken against their humanity.
You know what? That's funny you say that, because I though they consider themselves gangs, but I consider them tribes. They're tribes that just need the right leadership. Because after all of the gangs that I've dealt with, be it Zimbabwe or in Johannesburg and Haiti, all of these different places, Compton, California, all this and that, everyone I talked to, they said that we would walk away from this lifestyle if we had two things: a way to provide financially for our families and living in a neighborhood where we didn't have to have a weapon to protect ourselves. Those were the only two things, the basic things. So I was saying, so you're telling me that somebody that's in Boise, Idaho, that's on that farm, that is able to, have a farmland and do this, that, and the third, and they're able to make some money, and they don't have to walk around with a chopper. They don't have to walk around with a AK-47. They don't have to walk around. You're saying that, that their way of life, just being able to live. Now, that to me, that should be the basics that a human should have on this planet. And so we're talking about some different things. And it's funny you even said high expectations, because I back then, and that was a few years ago, before the Freddie Gray situation, I'd actually went in the school system. I asked for 10 of the roughest schools. I took the high risk list from all the ones the teachers ain't want them in the class, all the ones that we want to get you out of our school. I took 25 of those students and I turned it into the high expectation list. And what I found is most of the school and the students was following the lead from the ones who were acting out the most. And the real problem is some of them had dysfunctions, like maybe dyslexic and different things of that nature, or this one wasn't able to really read, and he wasn't able to read. And so they had been falling through the cracks. And that was part of the reasons why they were kind of acting out in different things. And I found that if you ever get those in order, the rest would kind of fall in, because they kind of following their lead. They see him as cool. They see him as the one that's setting the tone. They see him. And that's what happened with the Freddie Gray situation, because the Commissioner Batts had came out and actually said that, we got a letter that was given to us from the gang members that they are coming together to try to harm police officers. And I just knew that this was a setup. And so I met with the leaders and I said, brothers, I had to meet with y'all in person. And I said, because this don't make no sense. And they was like, big homie, when have you ever known us to type a letter of a crime to actually hurt police officers? And I said, yeah, because y'all know that person named Rico. And they was just like, yeah, they was like, we being set up. They was like, we being set up. And so, and I saw that, and I saw that they play games to try to get sympathy during the time when the police were under scrutiny. That was all a lie. Now, I'm not saying they didn't get a letter. Maybe they actually got a letter, but they did no diligence of intelligence to try to find out the validity of it before you went on TV, on CNN, to say that we just received a letter saying that gang members are coming out to hurt police officers. And I was like, and you know what? That's why I ended up having a meeting. I had them, actually, the Hogan, The governor was supposed to show up. Ray Lewis was supposed to show up, and actually, it was Colonel Melvin Russell was supposed to show up. I had it at my father's church, and I had the leaders from the BGF, the Crips, the Bloods, and they were all was going to address it. Do you know that Hogan at the last minute pulled out, said he couldn't come? You know, saying then he said then Ray Lewis actually wasn't able to come. They said I guess it looked bad for them. His publisher said it looked bad for them to meet with the the tribe leaders. And so, and then also, you know, but the only one who did show up was Melvin Russell, and he actually ended up talking with them, and they told him to his face that that was a lie, that was a setup. And then let me tell you, even to take it even further, when everything kicked off, because those children, them students came they marched out of Douglas, and they just did a march out. What happened is the police, and I was actually at Freddie Gray's funeral at the time, and the people there was upset because a lot of the people from City Hall and a lot of the some of the officers and different things, they came and took up all of the front seats. So the community had to sit up in the rafters. And so, you know, and I was there. In fact, it was so disrespectful. I had a person from the news station that tried to do an interview while I was sitting in the funeral. And I said, I will not disrespect this family like that. Take that camera out of my face. And so, but when the students marched out, the police wouldn't allow them to get on the subway when it was time for them to go home. So they were blocking them from going to the only major hub with all of the buses and and that's where the resistance started. They didn't come out. They were doing they were just doing a sit out. They marched out of class at a certain time. They didn't say we was going to destroy this, destroy that. And what happened was that's what fueled the situation. And all of those cameras showing those teenagers who started throwing rocks and back and forth because they seen all of those shields and the officers with those sticks. Man, you cannot press up on people in Baltimore, not think you're going to get some resistance. And that's really what happened. And when I went down, and so by the grace of God, it was funny that I had 12 men that was waiting for me at Mondum, and they said, we want to go down into the riot, the uprising. They was just like, but we will only go if you lead us in there. And I think I actually showed the brother some footage of that. You know, I ended up marching down there. We got there, but you know what? You know who ended up helping me? When I seen some of those tribe leaders, you know what I'm saying? And then they ended up actually protecting some of the Black-owned stores. And I had them to link their arms together. And so you had Blood, Crip, BGF, all linking their hands together. No war. They didn't come there saying we're going to kill each other because he got red on. We're going to kill this brother because he got on blue, or actually he wearing black. You know, we're going to take him out. They came together to say we are not having this in our community. And I love that happened. In fact, I even was telling somebody that I actually helped save the Korean man's life on the liquor store on the corner of Fulton North and Fulton, which is right down from Pennsylvania Avenue where it started. And let me tell you this, you know, that was something because, you know, he was bleeding inside. And I was like, anybody that don't want to catch a murder charge, get out. They got out, and then I had all of the gang members fold their arms, go around, and we called his son. His son called the ambulance. They was afraid. So they drove, the ambulance came down, but then they got afraid and drove off. They sent a tank in there, and the man got out. And actually, one of my guys, it was actually Freddie Gray's friend. His name was Nehemiah. He's the young man that got stabbed up at Lamel Middle School. And so I knew him. I had mentored him. He was walking toward the guy that got out, the officer. The officer had a shotgun. He said, man, he said, what you going to do? Kill me? You already killed my friend. And he kept walking toward him, kept walking. Man, do you know that man, that officer shot his hat off of his head with one of those bean bags? Wow. And, you know, in the whole nine. And then the other one shot some like tear gas in between us. And because I was trying to shield him. And so it was really something, but we were able to help lift him up. Now these are so-called gangbangers, the ones that nobody want around, the ones who they feel they're the worst element in the world. Yeah, these same brothers pick this man up and help put him into the tank and save that man's life. And that's a story they did not tell and talk about. And I was right there on the scene when it went down.
Man, so that's a story right there. Dr. Ted Sutton just talks about how community activism took place in the context of being dehumanized. And so this speaking out for their own humanity, and then how humans came together who were alleged to be gang members, but they really are, as I said earlier, so-called gangs, tribes, right? Finding one's identity in the context of being dehumanized. And this is also important to know, that they said that the gangs don't exist in the same way in South Africa, because they say you must always remember who you are. And also the second thing was that there's identification of a common enemy. And I also like this recognition of the one who's telling a narrative that is to destroy a population. He said, no, that is not true. That is that the gangs are coming together against the police. You may have received a letter, but you didn't receive a letter from us, they said.
Right.
And that's important to note. I don't know where the letter came from, but we didn't say that.
Typing a letter, and it was good diction, I tell you,
So those things have happened for generations. And this is important to know. And so we see then that there are some good and some bad in this idea of law enforcement. And we see that there's some things that we learn from the narrative. The narrative is that when a people come together and speak from their voices, and they unify for the purpose of their humanity, things change.
Yes.
Say more about that, right? So now you're the ministry work you're doing, you've taken in homeless people, you've galvanized the community, you recognize the fallacy within the system, and yet you still stand and fight.
Yes, we must.
Go ahead.
We must. I remember, being in front of City Hall, and the community wanted answers. And they were, the crowd was out there. They had all of the petitions up, and the police officer had the shields and the sticks. But one thing that I noticed is that they had some people who were not of our color, and they had on the hoods, and they had on masks and those black backpacks. And a truck came in. Came on right down the street and dumped off a bunch of bricks and rocks. And I said, I know what's happening. See, and they started throwing rocks. And they actually even bust windows of regular cars and spraying Black Lives Matter. Now, you're not black, but you spraying Black Lives Matter. You not. And then we found out they wasn't even from Baltimore. And so that really bothered me. And I had some of my guys to grab them. But as they were throwing some of those bricks at the police, I had some of my guys to grab. And I normally would never do this. And I was like, I want you to show them. I had them take them to the petition where the police was on the other side. And I said, I want you to see these people. They not with us. They are not with us. You know what I'm saying? And, I wanted them to know, because it bothered me that people were being baited and then blamed for now destroying and burning up Baltimore when we had some people who had a different agenda, in that situation. And so, and I mean, so it's really, kind of sad, because I'm looking at we need really so much. You talk about a lot of money that's been pumped into Baltimore. But to be honest with you, the people I'm working with, they like, well, where is it? We haven't seen it. We want to see where this is going. And so it's being pumped into different places. And it's so sad, because, after COVID, hit, and then our children had lost the ability to really work with each other and work things out personally, because now we all about being on social media. Things changed and they lost some things. So I would say that some of our children are still fractured. And we need someone to as far as help us, but I think that we need to help ourselves first.
That's right.
That's what I think. That's why I'm trying to galvanize Black men to stand up and reclaim your fathers. You know, your households, and be the father in that household that you know that you can. I said people have no idea what it is to be a 12-year-old, and your mother is telling you that you the man of the house and you got to protect you and your little sister. And if a window cracks, the level of fear, or it sounds like somebody breaking in the house, the level of fear that this child would have because they don't have a strong man in the house. And that was the one thing that, so I didn't have a lot of fear in me because I knew that my father was going to get that shotgun in the corner, and he would even tell my mother, he was, if somebody breaks in this house, he told her to roll off the other side of the bed because he's getting ready to grab Betsy. And he knew that, you know, that something was going to flee. They wasn't going to want to, I'll put it like this, they wasn't going to want to stay in the house. And so I did not have the level of fear that it is to be a child in the house without a strong man. We got to reclaim our households.
That's why I talk about elevating the warrior spirit, right, in Black men, to know what to fight for and to know who you are in this process. I mean, there's so much here, right? I just want to thank you, Dr. Sutton, for taking a principled stance, right? To stand for those that have been despised and dispossessed and disinherited, those that have been placed on the sidelines of life, the back burner, those have been called the least of these. And yet you understand that inside of them is something that must be recognized. You said, give me the worst, and I'll show you how they can show up and be the best of these.
Yes.
That nobody rises to low expectations, that when you change expectations, you change outcomes. And so in this process, then we recognize that there has to be an acknowledgement that everybody has purpose and power. You mentioned Louisiana, and I submit to you that there was so much richness there that I told you that I grew up in Louisiana, but I never knew about the Deacons for Defense until someone asked me if I knew about them, and I was an adult in Washington, D.C. I'd gone through graduate school by that time. And it was when I first heard about Deacons for Defense, and I had been traveling up and down I-20 all of my life because my parents attended Grambling, and we lived in Shreveport, Louisiana. So we had to pass through, we had to pass by Jonesboro. We had to pass by Leesville. I mean, not Leesville, Arcadia, where they also did some work in Arcadia. And so we were in that area, but nobody talked about it because I think the fear was what happens when Black men stand up and have armed resistance, right? And this is what you're doing right now, standing up. And the same thing happened down in Southern, and the same thing happened in Jackson, other HBCUs. That it's not even talked about. We hear about the white institutions and how they had Kent State, other things, how they had their uprisings, but not about what Black students were doing because they were taking a stance. And I think the fear, again, as Public Enemy says, fear of the Black planet, that there's a fear of a population that takes a stance and say that I declare myself human. And stories can actually do that for you. But let's share that Louisiana story just for a moment of the Southern story, right? Mississippi, we see some of the same things happen. That's also where the Deacons for Defense stood as well. Arkansas, Elaine, Arkansas, where Black men stood outside of a church around sharecropping. They would have a meeting around about not getting their due pay for sharecropping. And when they took it, they had a meeting to discuss this. Some whites came outside, and a gunshot goes off, and a white guy dies in the process of this melee that happens. And these men were outside of a church taking a stance, and all of a sudden, whites from neighboring towns come together, and they call these things race riots, but they were race riots. These were just assaults. they actually assaulted in Lane, Arkansas. They went and killed almost every person they could see that was black. And people want to go see a movie called The Purge. That was a real life purge. Colfax,
Yes, yes, it
Louisiana,
was.
where
Yes, it
black
was.
men were murdered for taking a stance, for saying we will have this position, this title honored in Colfax of this man being a leader, and whites were not having it after during Reconstruction in Louisiana, and they shot up and killed them because at that time, in both conditions, there was a limitation on the amount of ammunition that they would
Ammunition.
actually,
They couldn't get the ammunition.
and so they had to pick and choose their shots in Colfax, Louisiana, because they knew they had so much ammunition, but they were willing to take a stance. Again, they were slaughtered. It was not a race riot. It was a slaughtering of a population. And you're saying
so
right
sad.
now that the slaughtering will not be on your watch. If you have anything to do with it, talk about that. Go for it.
Well, I mean, for me, you know, I want people to know the greatness we come from. And because a lot of times, you know, a lot of the young men that I talk to do not know that, you know, with the greatness that they come from. I was in a juvenile detention center in Nashville, and I asked the young men, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And as I went around the room, all of them said either dead or back in jail, except for 2 young men. And one just said computers, and I don't even know, the other one said construction. So it was really a sad situation. And then I was just in Cheltenham in juvenile detention center, and I asked them, how many fathers are in your lives? You know, how many of us have a father in your life? And only 2 raised their hand, and one said, my father is not a good one. He was abusive. He was, and so it was only one good man that had been in these young men's life in the entire room. And I'm talking about a room of about 25 to 30 young men. And I think that when I see that, I'm just saying we have to take back our families and, you know, and reclaim them by any means necessary, as far as I'm concerned. And the part with the police, because I told people I'm not anti-police, I'm anti-wrong. So for all of these, I'm holding accountable the officer that's the so-called good officer. You need to check your partner when you see him out of control. You know what I'm saying? And I was just like, if you need a mental health day because you had a bad day, your girlfriend left you and this, that, and the third, if you pull over that person and, you know, and they look like your girlfriend, or if you pull over this person and they look like the girl that left you, or the man that left you, whatever you need to do, you need to take a mental health day and not come to work that day because you're not in the right state of mind. But I hold accountable your partner, and you have to break that blue shield line wall that you feel that I thought not snitching was supposed to be a street thing, not for a person that's supposed to be protecting and serving. You need to let him know that he's doing wrong, and you need to tell your supervisor. And it's not snitching because that's your job.
Dr. Ted Sutton, when you speak life into a people, everything changes around them. He said that our people die from a lack of self-knowledge. Yes. That no one rises to that which is beneath them. This has been Profound Conversations. This has been Dr. Ted Sutton. This has just been a moment.
Yes.
To be able to elevate consciousness. Know that you come from royalty. Know that you have purpose. When you say that to someone, it changes everything. In Lion King, Father said, know who you are. And my grandmother say, be who you is and not who you ain't. Because if you be who you ain't, you ain't going to be nobody. Profound Conversations. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Sutton.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.